For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from Cape Town, South Africa. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. A bit of a downturn, really, for the Asian markets this morning. The kind of things they were worried about last week have been writ large again over the weekend, worries about global recessions and so on. China said it would stabilise its economy. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I think what it probably means is they're going to be accommodating to business after the COVID lockdowns. That was one of the conclusions from the Central Economic Work Conference, which reported on Monday. Shanghai Composite down, though, still down about 1. COVID is still continuing in China. More schools have been shut there. Hong Kong down about 0.5%. So basically, following on from a downturn on Wall Street as well last week. As far as the United States is concerned, stock futures are relatively flat. I did mention that last week was the second straight week of losses. Remember that the Fed raised interest rates by 50 basis points by 0.5%, and said that relatively high rates would stay for longer, although it didn't. It did sort of hint that maybe the rate of rises might be slightly shallower. The Nasdaq losing about 1% as well. Nike and FedEx are the big companies reporting this week. That's tomorrow. But basically, people are looking at a bumpy ride ahead, and I think we're probably waiting in vain for the Santa rally. As far as Twitter's concerned, an interesting post from Elon Musk. What they've done is that they've said that they will not allow free promotion of other websites on the Twitter site itself. So there's no more follow me to Instagram or follow me to Mastodon or wherever it may be. That will be actually erased from Twitter. But Elon Musk is now saying, okay, back me or sack me. In other words, he's saying to the 122 million followers of users of Twitter, if you don't like what I'm doing, then I will go if you tell me to. So there's a bit of a straw poll, really, as far as Elon Musk is concerned and his future as far as Twitter's concerned. A big headline this morning as far as the global markets are concerned, I think that global price pressures will probably continue and may trigger more rate rises. 33 countries tracked as a result of that. Higher prices are continuing. Services inflation is quite high as well in the United States, the UK, and the EU. For its part, the EU is backing this 15% minimum business tax, which has been decided. Janet Yellen says it'll lower the playing field. It has to be said that the United States has so far not signed up to this, but that's what they're heading for, a minimum business rate, whether it be corporation tax, whatever it's called, in whichever country it is, but a minimum rate of 15%. And that Janet Yellen, for one, is saying this is looking good, looking forward, and it's something which the various countries around the world, the OECD in particular, has been working for quite a few years. The UK braces for a number of strikes and the Prime Minister under pressure, but the government is actually digging in. It's huge now. Nurses, ambulances, customs, immigration staff, postal and rail workers. The nurses' pay perhaps is the most critical in the public's mind about this. The government is sticking to what it says was an independent report carried out into the NHS, and that recommended a 1,400 straight pay increase for all workers within the NHS. That was a few months ago, and that was not under strike conditions. And I have to share this with you. A number of people have noted, and nurses will not be amused at this, the NHS is advertising in the Midlands of the UK, Director of Lived Experience. The salary £110,000 to £115,000 a year. Nurses, remember, on not much more than about £32,000 a year. The Director of Lived Experience will be apparently somebody, no qualifications required, just somebody who judges whether or not the NHS is doing a good job in its area. Oil and crude prices have declined once again. I think we're going to be calling this, I'm sorry about these words, but contraction territory. I think that's the way to look at it right now, given that there was a feeling that China probably won't pull its way out of wherever it is right now, and still uncertainty over Ukraine. So, and nothing from OPEC plus. So we are, I think, in contraction territory. And I'd like to share just a few thoughts with you about the future of cryptos after FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried being imprisoned in the Bahamas. People have been looking at this and wondering what's going to happen to the crypto market. I think you'll probably still survive. I don't necessarily think it's all about doom and gloom, but blockchain certainly will survive. There will be more regulation, though, people feel, in the United States, the EU, and also in the United Kingdom. There'll be fewer firms and fewer bitcoins and fewer crypto coins, so that's a form of consolidation which tends to happen as these markets mature. And then innovation as well. Many more uses for blockchain, which itself is quite a good and transparent payment system. It's just that this whole Wild West, as it were, is taking a while to settle down, and it may be quite a few years. But as soon as it starts to happen, no reason to believe that blockchain won't be part of an international payment system one way or the other. That's the global view.
All right, real quickly. So mine is just going to be like a commentary, like a question. The question is, when will we have the end of greed in business and the end of con men? Because it's not just only about crypto. When you look at it critically, it's also about business in general. You remember Bernie Madoff. You remember many scams way back the 1800s. You remember Charles Ponzi, and the list keeps going on and on and on. So when are we going to have governance that is definitely going to edge out con men, scam men, and Ponzi schemes in the business world?
Never is the simple answer to that question. And what I would push for is education in financial services and the way that financial assets actually work. Only when you have that will you be able to have ordinary people taking sensible choices about looking at something and saying, if this is too good to be true, it probably is, and all those sorts of things that you and I would value when we look at companies. Look at the balance sheet, look at the management, ask yourself very serious questions about where this company is going to be in 5 or 6 years' time. All these kind of normal investment questions. But the problem is that people generally throughout the world, generations change. Everybody, not everybody, but most people in the world give into fear and give into greed as well. And it happens. Ask your friends who've been down to the local bar or the local pub or the local cafe and been, told by somebody this is a foolproof scheme. There is no such thing, unfortunately. So I think the answer to your question is never, but what I would press for is more individual education as far as financial assets and financial services are concerned.
All right, Michael, thanks. Now, when you talk about the director of lived experience in the NHS, despite criticisms, others have said perhaps it's about time that the NHS provided such a personnel to address concerns around some people's lived experiences in the area of racism and discrimination in the, with regards to using the NHS services. Despite the fact that, yes, some people might consider this wrong timing because of the strikes coming up in a few nurses' strikes. Would you say that, despite that, there needs to be, well, even if it's not called the director of lived experience, or perhaps the salary scale is reviewed, someone or a personnel who is paying attention to that? Because over the years, this has come up again and again, particularly from the BAME community in England. And then just talking about Twitter, I would like your thoughts on the fact that Musk and his many policies, the poll will come to an end in 4 hours, and the last check was 57% yes, 43% no. In the event that it ends with a yes, do you think he would, he said he would step down. Who do you think he would be handing over to? Because he's recently tweeted that, be careful what you wish for, because it just might come to pass.
I think it'll play out like this, and I'm only guessing as far as Elon Musk is concerned. Yes, of course he will take note of what, because he said he will take note of what the users say. Would you want the job? Because I certainly would not. I don't know which way it's going. I don't know what his plans for Twitter making money is concerned. I know that we have to pay for the blue tick approval, but I know that regulators around the world are saying, sure, Twitter, the bird can fly, but it flies within our rules. And I don't know what those rules are going to be. I think that it's going to be very, very difficult indeed. And it's not a job for the faint-hearted. So I don't know who would take it, but I certainly wouldn't, and I don't think you would either. I feel as though it's one of those it's what we would describe as a poisoned chalice, quite honestly, because there is so much after Twitter right now, and I think I don't think he's posturing. I think he probably means it, but what I think it might play out, he might say, okay, well, a lot of people I've approached a lot of people, nobody wants the job, so I'll do it. I think that's probably what he's doing. It's like a sort of confidence vote, really, isn't it? And that's the way it plays. As far as the lived experience is concerned, I mean, yes, look, there are plenty of people looking at the NHS. There are plenty of people gauging as to whether it works or not. And in lots of areas, it doesn't. It's not about the director. I mean, this is what we would, in this country, call tin ear stuff. Fancy advertising a job for £110,000 a year to judge the effectiveness of the NHS when nurses are earning £32,000 a year. How ridiculous is that? And quite rightly, I'm really glad it came up in the press so that we can all look at it. And it just points to what the managerial expectation of the NHS is and what the lived experience of people who actually care about the NHS, not care about it in a religious way, but care about it being effective. And also, who's going to be the brave politician that seizes the nettle, as I was saying on Friday, and actually grabs hold of this and says, look, for those who can afford to pay, then they should be paying. I shouldn't be getting things free. I should be paying for them. But as I'm a pensioner and I'm relative, and I'm no longer as young as I was, I get the services free. I can afford to pay for them. I should be made to pay for them. I'm not saying people who are poor, no, but people like me, yes. Doesn't happen.
Okay, Micah, I think you already addressed the question I wanted to ask you, which will have been after the FTX chaos. Is the crypto world down and out? But you already discussed that in great length. One piece of Bitcoin was about $70,000 about this time last year. Now it's less than $18,000. But you've already answered that question. My next question: if you were to take part in the Elon Musk public vote, how will you vote? Will you ask him to stay, or you ask him to step down? Because he himself is calling for opinions. And finally, Argentina won yesterday. A lot of excitement in Buenos Aires. Thousands of people gathering around the obelisk in that capital. But Argentina is a country with very serious economic crisis, galloping currency devaluation, inflation around the range of about 100%. But will this football victory translate into or provide an opportunity for economic recovery? Or will it serve as a precursor to economic innovation? Or you think there's just no connection between that great victory yesterday and the economy?
All right. I think as far as the general populace is concerned in Argentina, I'm sure they'll be rejoicing, and they'll probably be horribly hungover today after the celebrations of last night, which was a truly magnificent final. However, how does that translate into a country, as you quite rightly pointed out, with 100% inflation, the majority of the population living in absolute poverty, and I mean absolute, but not poverty as in European poverty, but absolute poverty, and a government which clearly is failing to tame inflation because it can't. Does the IMF lend Argentina more money? These are long-term questions. The World Cup final was a marvellous event for Argentina and show that they are clearly the best footballers in the world, and Lionel Messi, probably the greatest footballer that's ever lived. All that's very happy, but you're absolutely right. Does it actually attend to what's going on in the country? No, it does not. Elon Musk, he's welcome to Twitter. I think that what he might be wanting to do is to pay a bit more attention to shareholders in Tesla, for example, who are worried that he is having to sell so many of his shares to finance the Twitter deal. SpaceX, how is this diverting his attention away from what is a really, really serious problem? We're talking about the future of something which has been unlocked here, which is social media, and I don't see the way forward. So he's welcome to the role, and I think he should concentrate. He should concentrate on it. Get the production of Tesla cars up. There have been, we haven't mentioned them for about the past week in our sort of global look at things, but there's been a lot of returns as far as that car's concerned. They've not linked the production line, they've not linked the battery production, and they've not linked battery life either. So I think there's a long way to go. I would personally like to see him concentrate on one thing, but he's welcome to Twitter.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much indeed. Now, for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Udiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers. Yeah, real quick, I actually want to start with Elon Musk, because whenever we criticize leadership here in our own country, we make it a point to bash bad leadership. Elon Musk has been a disaster for Twitter. There's this recent policy that they flip-flopped on, which is the third-party links. Not sure if you've touched on that. Essentially, Twitter put out a policy, which they've now deleted within about 48 hours, saying that you could not, if you set up an account to put up a link to another social media platform, it will be deleted. That is, if you're on your Twitter account, you put a link to your Facebook, or you put a link to your Instagram, or Mastodon, or Parler, or anything else, it will be deleted. They want, because of revenue challenges, they want to be able to make those other platforms pay to promote their links on their platform. Now, if you're an SME, just to ground this here, if you're an artisan or an SME who has set up a Twitter account to sell food or to sell shoes or whatever it is, and you put a link to your Facebook or link to your Instagram to sell those same products, it will be removed. That has now been deleted. So I voted yes for him to go, although he already said he was going to leave anyway. So the poll, as you correctly stated, Ayo, is still ahead. We move now to the World Cup. There's been a lot of discussion on the infrastructure lessons, right? That Nigeria can learn from this small country of only 3 million people. Let's just quickly jump through this. A lot to get to, right? We start off with Qatar's budgets, half-year revenues for this year, up 67% year on year to $32 billion as a result of higher oil prices. We move on to their budget surplus for the third quarter of this year, $8.1 billion extra in their budget. 93% of their revenues come from oil and gas. So essentially, this World Cup, if you think about the amount that we can now jump ahead to how much they spent on their infrastructure within about 12 years, $200 billion, which is about half of our GDP, that this small nation that has a per capita GDP of, I think, $55,000 per person. Just quickly run through all the other numbers coming from the World Cup. You look at the amount of what is projected to be generated for the economy, $17 billion. I think the amount of visitors that they were expecting, 1.2 million visitors or so that they were expecting. FIFA's revenue target, I think, was $6.4 billion. That they're actually expecting more than that. Adidas, one of the biggest sponsors of this tournament, they're expecting about 417 million. So look, oil revenues, if you think about the fact that Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Oman, all these Middle Eastern countries were able to rack up a lot of money from benefiting from higher oil prices due to the Russia-Ukraine war. And Nigeria was not able to do that in the same environment. So 4 of us sitting at this table, the 3 of you are able to raise your revenues. I'm at the same table as you and I'm not able to do that. It is a really, really terrible indictment on the oil and gas industry. We quickly jump to Kenya. Fitch has downgraded Kenya's credit rating as a result of their FX challenges and their liabilities. Kenya is facing a mountain of debt. Here's what they said. The downgrade reflects Kenya's persistent twin fiscal and external deficits, relatively high debt, and deteriorating external liquidity and high external financing costs, which present constrained access to international capital markets. But they did continue. While they downgraded them, they gave them a stable outlook based on this. They expect Kenya's growth to remain steady in 2023 and 2024, following strong post-pandemic growth recovery. Growth has been mixed. The drought has affected the agricultural sector. However, they are forecasting real GDP growth of 5.4% this year, from about 5.4% in this year, yes, from 7.5 in 2022. You look at some of Kenya's numbers. Kenya's total debt 8.7 trillion shilling, but $71 billion. That is 62% of their GDP. It is incredibly high. Debt servicing, something we talk about a lot in Nigeria. They are looking at about $11 billion this year, 21% increase from last year. They've got a massive Euro bond payment that is due in 2024, $2.4 billion. That is one of the things that Fitch is looking at as to whether Kenya will be able to pay for this. What is William Ruto planning on doing? He is saying that he wants to triple tax collection, not raise taxes, but triple, that is, I think, maybe bring the informal sector in, close loopholes. He wants to digitize the provision of all government services. Can he do that? And then cut the 2022-2023 budget by $3 billion. One of the main things he wants to do is remove fuel subsidies and food. However, Kenya's energy regulator, they are keeping the subsidies for December because of Christmas, so they're not removing it yet. And then he says he's willing to sell off Kenya Airways. I think there are a couple quotes from him where...
Hallelujah.
Well, that's what he said, but he's talking to Delta right now. I don't know if we have the quotes from him. Well, yeah, so that's what we're seeing around from the African continent.
You know why I said hallelujah?
If he says he might.
You know why I said hallelujah?
Yeah.
That's a cesspool. That's a drain pipe on the Kenya economy.
That's the airline.
Yes. You see how much they used to bail out Kenya Air recently? See, Rotus, we know the problem of Africa. And you know the shocking thing? They're all similar.
Yeah.
The problem of Nigeria is not different from that of Kenya.
And not different from Ghana.
And not different from Ghana. Wasteful, stupid, idiotic, corruptic, spending.
Yeah.
We all know where this problem of debt started mounting for when our very good friend that came here, the former president of Kenya, to speak to us on democracy,
yeah,
Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, put in a subsidy on petrol because he wanted to get a leeway and advantage for political gains. That was where the problem started from. And the debt kept on mounting. Vis-a-vis corruption in the system, vis-a-vis having to bail out. We remember how the problem of Ghana started.
Yep.
Oil deals that were not properly done, and the government had to spend over $1 billion to buy back.
Don't forget the cathedral. And
the cathedral too. Wasteful spending. But vis-a-vis, look at Qatar. What did Qatar do with that same money? 32 billion year on year this year. Over a space of 12 years, Qatar looked and said, how can we develop our country? Human capital development. So they used the World Cup. They bid for the World Cup, they got it. They deliberately put the money over 200 billion.
It's incredible.
They built new cities.
It's incredible.
They expanded Qatar. They built new real estate. They built new roads. They built new rail.
It's amazing stuff.
And they tied it around the World Cup. And now on top of it, they're getting return on investment, 17 billion, knock on wood. Other people, FIFA getting 6.4 billion. Adidas, anyway, Adidas struck that deal in the 70s with FIFA because the CEO of Adidas then was close to Sepp Blatter. So they struck that deal with FIFA then, as regards rights and everything. They set up an independent sport club, I think it was ISL or something. We had to get most of the marketing right for the World Cup. 400 million US. So Qatar used tournaments to develop its own economy because it knows it's not going to spend this amount of money in the next 10 years. Qatar's already set for the next 20 years. But what do? We squander our riches. Now, Mr. Ruto is looking for money. Tripling tax. Where income revenue...
Triple tax collection.
Yeah. Where income revenue has already dropped.
Right. We'll have to see how he does
Where the country is on its knees and begging. So we all know the drain pipes. That's why we keep asking, do we need another Nigeria airline at this point in time? Anyway, they even say they want to give it to Ethiopia. What sense does that make? But you have AMCON that has like 3 or 4 airlines. Can't you just whitelist and name change?
Exactly.
Rotus, except we start telling ourselves the truth. Fitch will keep downgrading us, and we keep thinking Fitch is our own problem. Fitch is also a publisher now. I think it's round of Haste. It's the Haste group that owns Fitch now.
I think so. I think that's right. Yeah.
So Fitch is just a media outlet, just like anybody.
All right, yeah, very rightly said. Just to jump on what Rufai has said, when you look at the numbers, it's difficult to believe, Rotus, that we are all on the same table.
Right.
In terms of Nigeria and some of the Middle Eastern countries who are oil producers, because of, unfortunately, the stark difference in the reality of our economies and what we have been able to offer the people of the nation. Now, you talk about lessons from Qatar and what we can learn. So, as I mentioned, they leveraged the World Cup with a 12-year plan to develop their economy or develop their nation. We don't have, I don't even think we can aspire to bid for the World Cup yet.
Wow,
I'm
which is a
hoping that,
shame.
it's a shame.
That's
I'm
a
hoping that
shame.
because we need to fix
That's a
ourselves
shame.
internally. However, when we were speaking, my mind then went to, okay, we don't have the World Cup. We don't have something, tangible to aspire to. However, now I traveled, when you travel as a tourist to even African countries and you see that what they have isn't anywhere close to what we have.
Right.
Nigeria has the warm and cold spring in Ikogo Sea. I'm just looking at like revenue generators beyond, because World Cup, one of the big sellers, of course, was because it became a tourist destination and tourist delight. And so the figures you're seeing there are from people and organizations who invested because, of course, the World Cup was drawing the world there. And we don't have, like I said, we don't have the World Cup. But before we can then bid for the World Cup, there are other areas that we can tap into, we can develop. We're not looking at these things, and it's quite unfortunate. Perhaps one of the things we should start speaking about, we talked about the diversification from oil revenues. They talked about the leakages in the oil revenues. First 6 months, we lost about $10 billion in oil revenues. Investigating that. Whilst we are plugging that, let's also look at other parts of the economy that can generate revenue for us, where we can be a center and synergy for all, other countries. We are the giants of Africa. Unfortunately, we are not quite living up to that name, and it's quite unfortunate. I wanted to go talk about mosque, but I'll leave that too.
Let me start with Qatar.
Yep.
Well, are we not comparing apples and oranges here? To even imagine that you can compare Nigeria and Qatar. That's number one. However, if you are talking in terms of lessons, well, the basic lessons that we can take from this will be in terms of organizational capacity. The Qataris, they've been able to give the world a memorable, unforgettable World Cup tournament. In fact, that final that was played yesterday, that final match, is adjudged to be the best
of all time
since 1966. Some people say it was the best of all time. Both the opening ceremony and the closing ceremony, and many, may not make big weather anymore out of the political controversies surrounding that tournament, because the Qataris showed focus, purpose, and everything boiled down to leadership. They built 100 hotels, 8 stadiums, and train stations, and they were able to just do all of that, in a very seamless manner. That's one lesson that we can learn about countries using opportunities like this to brand themselves. Well, that's a no-brainer. When cities opt to host sporting events, it's an opportunity to develop infrastructure, to attract goodwill to the country. We've seen it in Los Angeles. We've seen it in Edinburgh. We've seen it everywhere. And the Qataris have done so well. They've now been given the opportunity to host the Club World Cup.
Right.
Okay, that's an endorsement.
Exactly.
First Middle Eastern country, first country in the Arab world to host the World Cup. So what they have achieved is a source of pride for an entire region, not just the country itself. However, while I say that, I read a piece by a Pakistani journalist who was grumbling that, look, over 40,000 migrant workers from Pakistan were involved in the building of infrastructure in Qatar. And he was saying, well, Pakistan is more interested in sending migrant workers. Why was Pakistan not in the World Cup? That he would like to see in the future. Pakistan also on the field of play, showing that it can compete with others. But that's just by the way. Now, as for Kenya, well, what President Ruto said really is that I'm not in the business of having an airline that carries flag. He said, I'm not into that business. So many countries say you must have a national airline so that you can carry your flag. But he's saying, what is the point? If the airline is a loss-making airline, and that's why he says he's looking for an investor to take up Kenya's shares in Kenya Airways. So if the business is not doing well, the basic thing in business is about return on investment. You don't set up a business because you want to lose money or because you just want to national ego. So that's one lesson perhaps that we can learn from Kenya. But as to what he wants to do, he has been very consistent. You recall that during his campaign before the August 9 polls, he said he was going to remove those subsidies put in place by former President Kenyatta. He said also that he was going to do tax reforms. And the way he wants to go about it, he was preaching about equality, that he's going to tax the rich more instead of taxing the poor.
Amen.
In Kenya, 30% of the population, if you put them together, what they can boast of is owned by just about 2% in the entire country. So his mission is to correct inequality. However, the point to be made in this regard is that you have in Kenya a president who came in, who made promises, and we see him taking on those promises one after the other.
Yes.
That's another lesson that those who want to be president of Nigeria must learn. That you don't just go to the campaign ground and make all kinds of promises. If you don't follow through, if you don't have the capacity to keep your own promises, you will be called out. That is it.
That's it. Lots of lessons for Nigeria today.
Thank you very much, Ruto.
Thank you.